This training video will teach you how to redact, tag, and annotate documents. Here, you will learn how to redact, annotate, bookmark, and tag documents on your desktop from SharePoint using Adobe Acrobat, and how to do those same things on an iPad using PDF Expert. You'll also learn how to use links to SharePoint documents in SharePoint lists, Word outlines, email, and other documents, and you'll learn how to use enterprise keywords to create and use custom tags for documents. Before proceeding on, be sure to watch the short training video Working with Metadata, as well as the short training video Filtering, Views, and Copying. You will need the information in both of these videos to assist you in understanding the steps that we perform here. We will recover some of that material briefly, but it would be useful for you to see those other videos first. So the first thing I want to show you is how to create a bookmark folder and store those cases into the folder so that you can go to the case you want quickly without having to go to the master SharePoint list in your web browser. This is a very much quicker way to access cases. So let's assume that I want to add the FLDS case to my case list for rapid access in the future. What I would then do is I would go to the SharePoint case list and then scroll down to the FLDS case, for example, because that's what we'll be using later in this video for demonstration purposes. Once I navigate to the landing page of that matter or case, I will add the bookmark. And so I'm in Chrome right now, so I'll click Bookmarks, bookmark this page, and I've got the name as FLDS. If it was long and I wanted to shorten it, I would edit it here, and I want it to go into this folder Cases, which is part of my bookmark bar. And then I click Done. Now, when I open that Cases folder for sub bookmarks, I see FLDS down here, and I really like to have these things in alphabetical order, so I drag it back up and it's in alphabetical order. Now with that little trick behind us, let's get on with the demonstration of how to use Adobe Acrobat on your desktop to redact, tag, annotate, bookmark, and so forth. I've got a browser window open and it's set so that it hides the menu bar when I move away from the top of the screen. So let's go up to my specially made browser bookmark folder so that I can get to the file that I want to use to demonstrate these procedures for you. We'll go to the Mancos versus Aquarius case, and from there we'll go to internal work and working copies. And you'll see that I've created a folder here called test, which contains some spare copies of documents that we'll use to demonstrate the principles that we're about to cover. One thing that's very important for you to understand is the information pane. It's been covered in other videos, but let's cover it again. You'll notice that if I hover over a document and click on it, the metadata for that particular item will be visible on the right side of the screen in the information pane. If you don't see the information pane, you can show it or hide it with the little I button in the corner that you see where my cursor is now. You'll also note that this content type for these documents has been set at records because that's where they were copied from. So the first thing we would do is group select these and then change them in bulk to the working copies content type, which has slightly different metadata than what you would see in the records folder. So to change the content type for all of the documents, I simply select them all. I change the content type to working copies, and then scroll to the bottom and click Save. Having done that now, you'll see that when I select any one of these documents, the content type is working copies, which means that the metadata you see here is the metadata that was designed for the working copies library. Now we will learn to use filters to keep track of where you are in a collection of documents. So to do that, we have to create a temporary custom column designed to keep track of whether or not I have reviewed the document. This is very easy to do, and the way we'll do it is we'll go over here to the column for name, and it could be any column, but it's going to insert the new column to the right of where we were. I go down to column settings, I say add a column, I make it a yes/no column, and we'll call it BMG reviewed ? And we'll make the type of the column, as we've said, yes, no, and the default value will be no. Then we hit save, and you'll notice that it added that column right here. When we look at the information pane, however, you'll notice that the column once we select any item, appears at the very end of the information pane. There's a different procedure to reorder categories in the information pane than there is for setting the column order in the document view, as you see up here at this point. Let's take this first document and let's assume that I have reviewed it, which I haven't, but we just want to show you how this is going to work in the list. And I go down to BMG reviewed and I switch that to yes. And you'll see that that appears right here in the appropriate column. This is important because I can create a filtered view now that will hide any document for which I have reviewed it and the answer is yes. The way we do that is to set up a filter. So what I can do then is click on that column, click filter by, and then if the answer is empty, and apply, anything for which the answer was yes is now hidden from view. Alternatively, if I want to do the exact opposite, I could change the filter from empty to yes, and I'll only see the ones that I've already reviewed. So these filters can be terrifically helpful in that way. If I go back to empty, you'll see that anything I check yes on, say I choose this next document, and I look at the information pane and I scroll down to BMG reviewed, and I check yes, that document will also go away if I have my filter turned on. We see that it has vanished as well. So the only documents remaining visible are those that have not yet been reviewed. Now we'll learn how to use Acrobat to annotate, bookmark, tag, and so forth. So here I am in my browser window. I'm back in the test folder of the working copies library in Mancos versus Aquarius. I've changed the status of those two folders we used previously to demonstrate how we use the filtered list to keep track of what we've already reviewed back to no, so that we can actually review them. And I will go ahead and open the first document. As I look at it, I can see right away that something needs to be highlighted, redacted, or annotated. So the first thing I'll do is download this simply by clicking download. It will download into a test folder that I've created on my desktop because I've changed the default browser download location to that subfolder for convenience, and it automatically opens up in Adobe Acrobat without having to do anything. I can then highlight if I wish to by simply clicking the highlight button and then selecting the text that I want to highlight. I can add a text comment by clicking the button to do that and then inserting the text comment. This is important. And if I want to change the location of it, I can simply click it and move it so that it doesn't interfere with my text. And I could also add a comment box if I choose to do so by clicking that and then placing the comment here. I would type in my comment, this is a comment, and post it. And then when I click away from there, you can see there's a comment there. To hover over it and see it is simple. And now I want to return the document back to SharePoint. What I would simply do is click File and Save. And it'll go back to that temporary test folder that I had created. And then I can simply close the document, go back to SharePoint, close that, and then open my test folder, which I would normally leave open for this purpose, and then drag that file back into SharePoint. Drag and drop. It wants to know whether I want to replace it. And I do because it's in working copies. So I have now replaced that. If I go and look at it again, you can see the annotations that I made visible in the browser. It's that simple. So it's important to remember now that I've completed that step to mark that document as having been reviewed by BMG. I'll change that to yes. And then I can simply close that file and this yes becomes visible. And if I had my filter turned on, which is real easy, I just click filter by, and then I click empty and no as the only things that show, that one will go away. Now, one more thing that's important to discuss in terms of annotating with Adobe Acrobat is using bookmark. I just happen to know from previous inspection that the longest document in this test folder is this last one. We'll open that up and you can see it's already been annotated by me in the case itself in real life. And you can see I've got handwritten annotations. These things were made with my iPad in PDF Expert, but you can see that this document is 59 pages long. So let's scroll down to a section that we decide we want to bookmark for use in a deposition. Let's say it's right here. Well, as soon as I know that it's got something like that, I remember that it's on page 9. Let's go ahead and download it and bookmark that. I click download, it opens up in Acrobat, and I can quickly go to page 9 simply by typing that number up here and hitting enter. And there's that paragraph that I wanted to bookmark. One thing that's useful is to open up this sidebar all the way so that you can see things like bookmarks, which are here. Once I click that, this opens up and I can see the various bookmarks that have already been added. But let's add one more bookmark so that I have the ability to show you the way to insert those. What I will then do is select some text and then click the icon for new bookmark. And it's going to put in the text that was there. So I want to change that to something more useful as a subject matter. So I could just say airflow meters, for example, instead of the dedicated airflow meter. Flow meters. And now I have that bookmark and it's done. So let's say I was back at the beginning of the document or somewhere else in the document. Maybe I'm on page 1 again at the beginning and I click airflow meters. It takes me straight to that paragraph that says airflow meters. Now, what if I want to change the order of the bookmark so that they're different from what appears in the document? All I have to do is drag the bookmark to another location and it's there. And I can bring it out or up and then moving it to something above or below that location. It's very important to remember that things will not move above a sub-bookmark unless the sub-bookmarks are closed. So I close that and I move that down to here, and now it's in the secondary location where I want it as a primary topic. And if I'm somewhere else in the document and I click airflow meters, there's my bookmark. Now, let's return this document to SharePoint, and I'll show you how valuable that can be without being in Acrobat to find the bookmark. So I'll go ahead and save it by hitting Command S, or I could hit File and Save, and then I can simply close that window, and there is the document that I just edited. So if I click the X in SharePoint to return to the list, and then drag that document back into SharePoint, and say, yes, I want to replace it, there we are. Now, one thing that's important to notice is that it put it at the top of the list because this view is filtering by the date that it was modified. Sometimes I like to have things show up at the top of the list that I've just modified so I know what I'm going to do with it in terms of assigning further metadata, such as BMG reviewed or something along those lines. But notice this, when I click to look at the document, I don't see my bookmarks unless I actually open the document. Right now I'm in a preview mode of SharePoint. If I want to see it in the browser, I click Open in Browser, and notice what I have. In this tab here, I can see the bookmarks that were added, and those can be expanded. And there's the bookmark I added on airflow meters. Now remember, I'm not in Acrobat. I'm looking at this in the browser display for the PDF, which shows me dedicated airflow meters paragraph that I just had. This is very, very useful. If I've bookmarked documents in working copies, I can go to those pages directly inside the browser window without having to open any PDF viewer. And if I have previously assigned document control numbers, which this document does not have because the case is not yet in litigation, then I would simply ask the witness to look at the document in the unmarked form and go to Bates number XYZ, and he would then flip to that, and I would be looking at my highlighted copy. As you can see, this document is heavily highlighted, and I could use those bookmarks or my highlighting to guide me through the questions I ask the witness on the record in the deposition. Now let's talk about how to use Acrobat to redact documents. So let's take a look at this top document, Mancos Colorado Re-Trip Report. And let's say that we want to redact some portion of that. Let's say we want to redact the second paragraph of the document. Let's download it to Acrobat and do the work. So I click download. The document opens in Acrobat automatically, and we wanted to redact that second paragraph. So all I do is I find the redaction marker over here, and then I simply hit mark for redaction. I can redact text and images, entire pages, and I can insert search strings for names or phrases that I want to be blacked out anywhere they appear in the document. But right now, I'm just going to select some text or images to redact. Here's my paragraph. It shows me some instructions. I don't need that. And then I just mark the paragraph. This is what I want to black out. Now, having done that, it's going to show me that as a box, and then if I just hit apply, it's going to ask me if I'm sure. I say yes, and that box is gone. This is extremely useful. So let's go ahead and move that back up to SharePoint. I hit save, Now the saving is different in redaction of documents than it is in annotation, because Acrobat knows that you probably want to keep the original and not overwrite it. So what it actually does when you save it is it creates a new file name for it. Let's take a look at what it created. It created a name for a file and it says redacted. That's the one I want to drag back up. Before I go very much further though, I need to remember that there was an original and it has its own URL. So I'll go ahead and drag this back up into SharePoint from my working folder on my desktop, and I'll show you what we need to do with the original in terms of recording the URL for the original and placing that in the confidential metadata for the redacted version. So first, let's get back to our list and drag the redacted file back up into the list. Once the upload is complete, you can see that I have the redacted version as well as the original. Let's take a look at the redacted version. There's my redaction. Now the redaction process is typically happening in the records library, which has its own metadata field in the newer templates for the link to the original, and you need to add that link to the original into the metadata for the redacted copy. So if I look at the original, I open it up, there's no redaction here. I would then select the entire URL and hit Command C to copy it, and then I would go to the redacted version, and in the metadata field for that, I would scroll down to that and paste that into the metadata field. This is a very important step because, as you know, the metadata helps guide the automated workflows in SharePoint in terms of creating and updating the logs list, which in turn is the source of the privilege log and the production log. When you're looking at an original record in the records library, you may want to see the original, and it is also in the records library. Just as you see both of them appearing here in my test folder, they'll also appear in the records library because each document has a different name, and this makes it much easier to find the original in the records library. If you're looking at a redacted document in the serve library, you'd have to use the document control number or base number to find that document. Now let's take a look at how to do most of these same operations on iPads and iPhones. This is particularly useful if you find yourself in need of reviewing, annotating, bookmarking, and so forth in a remote location using only your iPad, or in a pinch, even your phone. So now let's talk about performing all of the same operations we just covered in Adobe using PDF Expert on an iPad. You can see here that I have PDF Expert installed down on my dock, because I use it a lot. When I click it, it opens up into the menu view, and you can see in the top left corner, Documents is shown. Right below that, you see iCloud, which connects to Apple's cloud, and then below that, you can see in the cloud. Now, I want to edit a document that I've stored in the FLDS case. So in order to be able to access that in working copies directly, because I don't want to have to do drag and drop style operations, I simply go to that case in the browser on my iPad. And once I'm there, I select the entire URL for the landing page or for any other page, and I copy that. Once I have it copied, I go back to PDF Expert, and under this section here that says in the cloud, I click Add. Then I click SharePoint. Then I paste the URL that I just copied, and I delete everything after the case name. That once I have the URL up to the case name, I click Next, and for the first time and only the first time, it's going to make me log in, and then it will create that account. But notice the name it gave the account for that site address was Brett Godfrey. So I want to click the little gear at the top, and then click Network, and then click the three dots next to Brett Godfrey. Then click Rename, click the X to delete what's in there now, and then type in my new case name. In this case, it's FLDS. And then I click Close. From anywhere else in the menu, back to FLDS, and it'll show me all the libraries in FLDS. Now, the document I want to edit isn't in the working copies folder yet, so I'll go back to my browser and I'll put it there. I'll go into the filed library and I'll find the actual file that I want to annotate in working copies, which is this top document here. And I'll open it to make sure it's what I'm looking for. I see that it is. So from here, I'll simply copy it into the working copies library directly. Now once that's done, I go back to PDF Expert. I open my new network link to the SharePoint site, go to working copies, and you can see the document that I want to work on. So we'll open that up. So here we are looking at this document in PDF Expert. The very first thing I want to call to your attention is the little grid icon at the top left of the screen. If I click that, I can see a grid view of the document, which is very convenient, particularly if there are pages that have highlighting and I can see those in the grid view very quickly. Of course, there are faster ways to navigate to highlighted portions of a document, and we'll cover those in a minute. I just wanted you to see that this is very good though, because let's say I wanted to go to page 44 of the document in a hurry. There's two quick ways to do that. But I could scroll down to page 44 and I can see in the bottom right corner of each of the pages what page number it is, and I would just click that and I am instantly on page 44. Another way I can rapidly navigate is to use the scroll bar, and as I'm scrolling up and down, if you notice the page number indicator that showed up in the bottom right corner of the screen while I'm moving the cursor, it shows me what page I'm on. So I can scroll to a page number that way as well, and that's pretty quick. But let's say I want to go back up to the top of the document and begin annotating it. One of the things that I would start with is to mark the very first page so that it shows up to the reader who looks at it as a document that was annotated by BMG on a certain date. So I would click the Annotate tab at the top, and then I could add a stamp. So I click the stamp icon, and I have already created a stamp that says BMG Annotations. So I would tap that, and then I tap where I want the stamp to go, and then I can move it around. And now this has been identified on its face as a document that's annotated by me, and it even shows when I did it. The next stage of annotation to cover is highlighting. So let's scroll down the document a ways and pick a passage that we want to highlight. So we'll take this paragraph under section 1 of the document. You'll see at the top in the center the three A's. One of them is a highlighted A. If I press that, it stays underlined so that I can see it's been selected, and then once I drag my finger across some text, it will highlight that text for me. If I press and hold that icon button at the top, it will give me a choice of colors. So I may want to use color coding for some system I have in my highlighting, and I could highlight in a different color. So let's say I want to underline. Obviously, all I do is click the A that's underlined, and then I could underline something. There may be a system in my mind for whether I highlight or what color I use versus underlining and so forth. Now let's take a look at adding annotations. One way to do that is to click the pens at the top left, and then from there I can annotate in handwriting. I don't usually do that though because it's not easily searchable. So I'm going to click the green check mark at the top left to get out of this mode. And then I'm going to click the text button. And from there, I'll tap somewhere on the document and I can start to type a text annotation. And that's much cleaner to look at, and it also shows up in the bookmark view, which I'll show you now. I'll click Done. And then I click the book icon at the top right of the screen. And you'll see I have three choices. The far left one is the bookmark choice. The one to the far right is to see all the highlightings and annotations. And the one in the center is to create an outline based on defined marked spots in the document. And I can change the order of the outline items to be different than the order in which they appear in the document or the order in which they were created. So first, let's go back to the highlighting portion. And let's assume that, for example, I'm in a deposition and I'm looking at a working copy of an exhibit that's been annotated in an iPad or Adobe, and I want to go straight to that highlighting or that annotation. So let's assume perhaps I'm way down this document here and I open the bookmark icon. I can see the highlighting that I've done, and the program shows you the text that was highlighted, at least the first 3 lines of it, immediately to the right. Now these things always appear in the order in which they show up in the document, and there's no way to change that. There is a way to change that, however, in the outline view, and we'll cover that last of these three things. But let's go back to the page itself, and let's assume I want to just bookmark that page. So all I have to do is click the bookmark icon, click the plus sign, and then I can give a name to that bookmark, or I can just leave it as page 11. But let's give it a name, and we'll just call it bookmark. And then I click done. And now let's say I go back and click the icon image to the right in the bookmark section, and I want to go back to that very first highlighting I did, and I can see what it is that I highlighted. It says plaintiffs allege that the legal framework, blah, blah, blah. If I click that, it takes me straight to that highlighting. Let's say I want to go to the bookmark I made, which is much further down. I open up the bookmark pane and I select bookmarks. You can see the only one I've created says bookmark. I click that, it takes me down to page 12, which is where I had bookmarked. Now let's look at the outline function. Let's assume that here on page 14 of the document, I want to create a bookmarked location that is actually within an outline. So I click that little book at the top again. This time I hit the center icon for outlines. I click edit. I click plus. And then I can change the name of the outline item. So we'll call it first item. And then hit done and done. And then click anywhere outside that box, it goes away. Now let's say I was back up above that and I find a different area that I want to highlight. And just to identify it, I'll annotate it in green. So this is text that's going to be something I wanted to mark as my second item in the outline. Once I've done the annotation, I click done at the top left, and then I click the bookmark icon, and I'm in outlines, and I click edit and add, and I've got a second item. I'll change the name of that to second item and click done. Notice now that the second item comes before the first item in the outline, and it also comes that way in the document. It defaults to that order. But in the order in which I want to look at those locations in the document, I want the first item first and the second item second, even though the second item occurs earlier in the document. It's easy to reorder the outline items. If I simply touch and drag the little 3 hash marks to the right, which are sometimes called a hamburger, I can then move these items by dragging and dropping them. So now I have the first item and the second item. So notice what happens if I click done to get out of the editing. I just tap the item, say first item, and it takes me to this page. You'll notice that I had not taken the trouble to highlight or annotate what it was at this location that I found interesting, but it's not too late. All I have to do is click annotate at the top, choose the color I want to use for highlighting, and then highlight something, and then click done at the top left. And then now if I want to go back to the second item, I simply click that. That's the second item, and it's on page 10. If I open this up and click the first item, which is on page 14, as you can see on the list, then I'm there. All I do is touch it. This is very useful in a deposition if you have an annotated copy of a deposition exhibit, because in bold you can see which of the outline points you're at, but you can also see what page it's on. So if you know you're going to the next thing, you can tell the witness, turn to page 10 of the document, or you may have to look at the Bates number to that document page and direct him to that. This particular document doesn't have Bates number pages because it's not an item of evidence, it's a court order from the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. But you can see how handy these three are. If I want to see my bookmark, I go to my bookmark. If I want to see my outline items, I can go to the first item or the second item. And if I want to see my highlighting, I can see that and go to the thing that shows up in that list. This is terrifically helpful. Now, what you will find is that once you've finished doing all of this, if I go back by clicking at the top left to what starts off saying working copies, watch what happens to that document. You can see the little blue bars sliding across, because what's happening is PDF Expert is saving that document back into the working copies library of the FLDS SharePoint site. So I'm directly accessing and manipulating those documents in SharePoint without having to download them and upload them, which is necessary on a desktop, as we've shown you earlier in this video. So next, what I'm going to do is, within this document, I want to remove all of my annotations, because I'm really going to bookmark and annotate this this document thoroughly, as I need to do so for a case I'm working on, and I'll show you what it looks like after I've done that. But before I start, I need to get rid of all of my bookmarks and annotations. One way to do that is to simply tap on the thing that you added, and this menu appears, and hit clear. There's a much faster way to do this, which is to open up the menu and then swipe to the left on each one of these things. When you do that, a little trash can will appear in red. If you click that, the item goes away. So I can very quickly stroke through these, swiping one after another, and get rid of all of them without moving around inside the document. And within the outline mode, it works exactly the same way. So I'll get rid of all of those items as well as my bookmark. And now I have a clean document to start over with real annotating, bookmarking, highlighting, and so forth. And I'll just show you what it looks like when we're done with that. And then I'll show you back in the browser view in Chrome, you would be able to see all of the bookmarks at the top right of a browser view, again, only in Chrome. But you'd also see in any browser all of the highlighting, underlining, and text annotations that I'd created. So now to finish off on our work with the iPad, let's take a look at the document that we were modifying before, which was the 10th Circuit opinion in FLDS case. We are now looking at the desktop computer in Chrome, and I'm in the Working Copies library. I've pinned that document to the top so I can get to it quickly. Notice that when I look at it, you can already see that I've applied the stamp using PDF Expert to make it obvious on the first page that I have annotated this document. So you'll notice we don't see any of the bookmark information because this is a SharePoint preview in a browser, which is not the same thing as a full PDF preview in a browser. So to get past that, we simply download the document and then open it. And it opens in a browser. I'm in Chrome now, and you'll notice that I have my bookmark information here, including my bookmarks and the ones I've applied to all the chapter headings that were assigned by the court. And these all open up into detailed breakdowns. All of that work was done on the iPad. So if I want to get straight to a certain section of the annotations, I can click that, or in my own bookmarks that I thought were important, I can click there and it takes me to my annotations. And you can see I've got highlighting, underlining, and text. Also, if I scroll up some, you'll notice different colors of annotation or highlighting. And in fact, in one location, I've even provided some handwritten annotations, as you can see here. And if I zoom in on this a little bit, you can read my handwritten annotation as well as my typed annotation. So between the bookmarking capability, the outlining capability, the ability to see your annotations in PDF Expert, you can imagine that this is a terrifically useful tool, whether you're preparing a document for use as part of a motion or as an exhibit in a deposition. If it's going to be an exhibit at trial, we typically would do a different process using TrialPad. That will be covered in a separate video. That's the end of this video. Thank you.